Perfect. Thank you. So with that, we're gonna get into the meat of the session, which is gonna be reporting. So why do we evaluate and why do we report as organizations, right? So these are a few refreshers of what we have spoken over the last session, but you may be asked, like, what are your expected results, or how do you know your program is successful? What is the outcome of your evaluation plan, and how would you measure your program's performance? And if we take it, for example, to like the application that we have for the Miami Open for Business microgrant, there are two questions specifically about social impact and organizational impact. So this is something that like more and more funders are starting to ask when you are in the process of requiring like for funds or even acquiring like more people to join to your organization. So like these are a few things that the reason why the reason why reporting is so important. So again, we want to give you a few tips into like how you can start your measurement and reporting plan for your organization. The other things for what you might want to know and start creating your reporting and evaluation plan, it's because you would like to like do your venture self-assessment, right? Self-assessment of your work. You can have information and data so that you can tell the story about your impact. And if necessary, like these numbers and data can give you the enough insights for you to start innovating, iterating the work that you're doing, right? So what I love about data and reporting, it's like, yes, one, it can tell the story of what you're doing, but two, it can inform the decisions of how you're doing things and how you're moving forward into the programs or services that you are providing as an organization. So I know data and impact evaluation is a very broad topic and it has a lot of different like layers. So during this session, we want to give you the specific or like the first tips and tricks into how can you get started organizing yourself to your reporting and evaluation process. So if we leave some information outside, please make sure that you also book time with Lara or you can book time with me so that we can go over the more in-depth into how to go over the plan. But what we want to get you is for you to have a robust reporting and evaluation plan that you can like get it today and apply it as of now within your organization. So the first step of what you need to do when you're thinking of reporting and evaluation, it's defining what you are doing as an organization. And I'm gonna breeze through this because this is what we talked about it on our previous session. So if you weren't able to join us, like I will encourage you to go back and watch that session so that you can know how to fill out the different frameworks. So there are different ways on how you can start like organizing the way that you understand the work that you're doing is having an impact, right? So you can have different impact frameworks that you can use to organize your organization's data and your organization's work. So the one that we shared over the last session was the impact framework that the metrics team shared with us, which defined like who are you working with or who are you supporting, what is what you're doing is referred to your activities, programs, and services that you are provided. The quality is referred to what is the direct impact that you're having based on that specific implementation or solution that you applied. The better off, it could be related to the outcomes, right? So what is the impact that you are having, like the long-term impact that you're having because of that implementation or the implementation of that solution. And then the community contribution is the bigger picture into like how your organization and your solution is supporting to address that bigger social impact that we are addressing within our communities, whether it's like I don't know, like gender equity, whether it's quality education, like that will be defined based on your organization's mission and vision. The other models or frameworks like that you might have been working on or you might have done before, it's a logic model. And again, these are different words into like how can you start organizing your information, but like I want to give you like the different ones that could be available. So again, your logic model defines your inputs, which is like what you're putting into your organization as resources. The activities, it's like the specific solutions that you're having or that you're implementing within your communities. Your outputs, again, is like that the direct impact that you're having based on that solution, and the outcomes is the long-term impact that you're having based on the solution that you implemented. The other framework that you can also know or have been using, actually we did it in our very first session, it's a theory of change, which outlines the problem statement that you have as an organization, the solution that you are providing as an organization, and then the desired impact that you would like to have. So again, these are the different frameworks that will give you the eye level overview, or like the iceberg overview of like what you're doing. And this is so important for you to know, so that like now we can like go into the nitty gritty and understanding how are we impacting the community, which is gonna be defining in the different frameworks. So with this one, we're gonna pause and then moving on into the second step, which is defining your input. So defining the what are you doing as an organization. So with this one, it will be like, what do you need? What are the different activities that you are creating as an organization to make your impact a reality? So with this one, I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna pass it to Lara, because this is where we started moving into like the different impact frameworks that we have as an organization.
Hi, yeah, awesome. So as I mentioned in the chat there are different types of frameworks and different ways that you and your organization can understand what your impact is. And it's important to find the one that's right for you. But getting into this next step, so step 2, understanding what are we doing that makes our activities, what are we doing that makes all this impact a reality? So you can call that your input. What is your organization doing? So you need to understand what are those elements to your work that you can measure in a way that will then point to the overall impact. Next slide. So for example, let's go actually to the next slide after that. Some examples for that can be funding for your programming. So for example, Louisiana working with Open for Business, the inputs and the what that they're doing is hosting virtual sessions. So the number of sessions that we're hosting, the number of program staff that we have working on this event. So trying to make sure that we're trying to quantify what it is that we're putting into the work, so that we can see that how those metrics are going to stand up and impact that our overall work. Next slide. So you can see this in the Upmetrics framework, and it's very similar in your logic model. But really what the Upmetrics team was trying to do was put data front and center. So making sure that you're counting, you have a numerical value for something, you can actually see, we know when you're looking at reporting, eventually you're able to say, we've hosted over 350 hours of mentorship for the Open for Business, organization. We have offered over $350,000 to organizations to support their growth. We have, brought together 10 different subject experts for so many hours to be able to engage. So really what you're trying to do is understand what are the things that your organization is doing to be able to create the change that you are looking to see in your community. Let's go to the next one. So defining your outputs and outcomes, or as Upmetrics calls it, quality and better off. So you really want to be able to understand what it is that those whats are doing to your who. So how are we making that indirect, how are we making that short-term change? What is the quality of our inputs? How are we measuring that work? So let's go on to the next slide. So you can see here, provide high quality programming for youth is very tied to how we know that we're getting a good job done. So you need to be able to understand, is the work that we're doing providing enough value so that we can actually see some results. So really at this opportunity, this is where we would say, this is why Louisiana uses the survey question. So would you recommend coming to this session again? Or would you, out of a scale of 1 to 5, how great was this session? Or how much did this session support you in the work that you're doing? It really helps you understand if the work that you are doing does have the opportunity to make a change. And that doesn't necessarily, mean that it is, 100% doing anything. It's just definitely helping you get to the point where you're understanding, you know, is this information that I'm collecting helping me understand that I'm doing my job better? So then we get into the better offs of that. So you can see you measure the quality of your work. You can go to that next slide, actually. And then measure what is the outcome of that. So if I have people joining my sessions time after time, that's showing that it is a quality session. So that is showcasing retention of individuals that are coming to my sessions, that are coming to my programming, that are, utilizing my services. But really, what is the impact of that? How are we actually seeing them grow? How are we actually identifying that the quality is improving their lives in some way? So really asking that next question, is anyone better off because of that? So are they experiencing increases in funding? Are we seeing them hire more individuals? Are we seeing the people that we're working with increase their grade point average? Are we seeing attendance increase for schooling? Are we seeing graduation rates increase? Are we seeing more people in more of our individuals in employed positions? So really trying to understand what is that next step of better off. So how are we actually is the work that we're doing making a direct impact into those that we are working with? So that's really that longer term sort of impact. So you can see we have the output, which is quality. So that is short term. Are we really enjoying this? Is this service or the platforms or the things that I'm doing and working? And then really better off is, did it actually improve their lives? Are they really seeing a difference in their experience? So you can see here, we'll go through a little bit more of the examples. How many people attended your program events? So that goes right to quality. How many initiatives or interventions did you run? This is a really good example of just trying to define what it means for your organization. But the one thing you will notice in each one of these, specifically with the metrics framework, but also along the same lines with the logic model, is that these are numbers and we're trying to quantify this. When we're talking about quantitative data, it is really, you want to be able to have something that you can measure, something that is useful to your organization, something that you have the ability to really do some sort of calculation on that. And then we take that qualitative data and we add that in as additional information that can then support that. So, quotes from someone that will be able to say, a little bit more and give a little more context to why they have thought that your work, your service, your platform was a quality event or a quality service. Next. All right, and then you can see here for the Metrics platform how to provide quality youth programming is like one of the objectives. Once again, like I said, you can see we have average selection, average satisfaction score, so things that you can do calculations on. Going to the better off. So this is where we get to, it's a little bit more difficult to quantify better off because you have to be thinking more of the long-term examples of what does that mean to understand that someone is doing better. So are we tracking people 3 months after their programming, 6 months after the programming, or are we keeping track of our data in some other way that isn't surveying? Are we identifying information from, are they coming to our events and providing feedback during the event? So making sure that even during these sessions, like Luisana and team might be collecting quotes from you as you're explaining, troubles that they're having in your data collection, and then maybe following up later and asking more qualitative data. Do you feel like that session was good for you? Or, maybe even looking at your own social media posts and collecting that information to say, look at how well, Pink Path is doing now that we had a session with them and they were part of our Open for Business organization, our Open for Business program. So really trying to understand that some data collection is going to be a little bit more difficult to collect, but you have the ability to do it based on the wide of like breadth of information that is available via social media, via surveys, or anything that really you can collect information from. So I would say make sure that you're thinking about this in a way that really helps your stakeholders understand that there is change and there is growth in your organization and the individuals that you serve and communities that you serve. And then you can see here, we have that in the Better Off section. Each one of these objectives is indicating the different individual themes of the Better Off of this specific organization. So improve relationships and social emotional learning outcomes. SEL is pretty heavily used in this section, understanding how we're seeing pre-post growth or delta in the way that they're experiencing specific emotional learnings. And so really it's trying to understand how are we targeting those individuals, and how are we seeing the flow of their growth through our programming. So here we are, we're going back into the mirror bar thought, so of Better Offs. So immediate initial, so we know that our organizations, are bringing lots of value to our communities and the people that we work with. So we're understanding, what are the short-term impacts, what are the midterm impacts, and what are those overall community contributions that we're seeing because of the work that we're doing. So, you might think about measuring knowledge and skills gained during a program initiative, then thinking about attitude and behavior in more of an intermediate sense, and then the overall community contribution, which is the most difficult to measure, but really the opportunity for you to see my organization is a part of a larger ecosystem. And how do I understand and measure that because I'm a part of this? How am I impacting my communities in a way that is focusing on the overall community as a whole? So this is a really good example. So voter registration. So we know that, there are different ways to get lots of voters involved, but really what we're trying to do is understand, the different elements other than just handing them a voter registration sheet. So you want to make sure that you are looking at all of the work that you do. So, it's not just, getting someone to register, but it's also understanding when the next election is, increasing and completing those registration forms. That's like a really quick way. Obviously, you can see like that short-term benefit, but are we seeing more newly registered voters in the next election? Are we seeing that publicly available data come through that supports the statement that we are getting people more actively involved in their civic duty? And then looking at that overall community contribution, are we seeing voter registration? Are we seeing turnover, and are we seeing a lot of turnout rate year after year? Are we seeing individuals coming to the polls on non-presidential years? Are we seeing them on the midterms? Is my organization, are we a part of that larger ecosystem? So have we also worked with other organizations to think through like what it is we're doing as a whole? How are we all working together collaboratively, but really looking at that community contribution as you're not just getting registration, but you're being a part, you're helping people become a part of their community and care more and have more of a say in the things that are happening in the political atmosphere and the advocacy of their communities. That's a lot of information. So we're going to pause for just a second, not a second, but questions you might have on the content that we've gone through so far, or thoughts. Andrea?
Yes, Andrea. Sorry, my camera's not working at the moment. Is there, because we our program, we have So we have our Leadership Institute, which the logic model would be a
Yep.
lot easier to apply. And then we also have a mental health component, which is essentially we provide individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling, and yeah, all those things. And so I'm wondering if like measuring our successes, if there's a recommendation aside from a logic model for more human services like that? Because it's
Mm.
hard to quantify. Because the hard part is like we do have drop off. Some folks will just phase out
Yeah.
without there actually being a hard cutoff. So how would we approach like those evaluating programs and with those caveats?
Yeah, I would say the hard drop-offs I think is like one of your thoughts is how do we help identify how to reduce drop-offs, or is it just trying to showcase that you are making a difference while there still are drop-offs?
The latter.
Yeah. I think what you really need to do is understand the value of your organization is not in how individuals are engaging, but the quality, this is like where like the quality of what they are receiving, because you can't, especially specifically with like human services like this, like you can't, there's a lot beyond your control. And so the one thing that Lou and I talk about a lot is how there is the way to like report and think about data a lot of times is thinking about like making a cake. So understanding how, like, if you're thinking about a recipe, like at the beginning, someone's always saying, like, why you need to give the point of, every recipe has that, like, why am I making this like blueberry crumble cake? Like, because my grandmother loved it. You need to set the stage for why your work is important. And that's where this whole community contribution thought can come in, where you can look at like, okay, at the end of the day, what is our overall impact supposed to be? So what are we trying to do? So set the stage with the problem that you're trying to address. So individuals in our area experience like mental health crises at 10% more than other counties in Florida. Set the stage of like what is the problem? So understanding like that overall top line of like why is it important for our organization to be doing what we're doing. So it's not so much that you're showcasing results where someone is dropping off and leaving your organization, but you're setting it up like, this is the problem. These are the things we're doing. So you're giving your ingredients, like, who are we working with? And then what are we doing? That's the ingredients. And then like getting into like this quality of like, how am I actually like, what are the things that like we can say we're doing right? So what and better and quality are coming into the point of like the recipe. So you need to make sure you're doing everything in the right order. You need to make sure you're adding all the right ingredients and doing the right things in order to address that issue. And then at the end, you get into that like community contribution of like, we know that this is a huge problem, but like this is what this cake looks like. This is what we've built. This is how we've made this cake. And we really think that like this is going to continue to make an impact. So like you're not saying so much and communicating that we're seeing a huge drop off, but like we have this formula of explaining our recipe in a way that shows, that takes data, that takes like qualitative and quantitative data and adds it into the mix to really show the work that you're doing. So it helps an individual consume that information in a way that shows your importance. I'm sorry.
That was very
Okay,
helpful. Thank you.
good. I'm glad. Aisha?
Hi guys, good morning. It's so great to see you all again. I wanted to also add something, Laura. I think your response was fantastic. But also too, I wanted to add that sometimes you have a drop off because you've served the purpose, and sometimes
Mm,
people need a longer period of time, right? So sometimes you need to immerse yourself, and then other times you just need to know that there's a positive community that's designed for me, right? And so I
yeah.
think you've given them what they needed. So sometimes the drop off isn't a negative. It's just they're there for me. I know where I can go. And so sometimes it's just being great and being who you are and having that welcome and welcoming experience. So when they feel a little low or they feel like they're not being accepted in another space, they know there's somewhere to go. So I just wanted to just add that.
Yeah, that's obviously, I love that came from Aisha, the Optimist Club. That actually makes a lot of sense. Really tracks. But yeah, that's a really good point. And maybe there is some qualitative data that you can add into. You know, we see a drop off rate of about 16%. And then maybe have a quote from someone who, you know, I was working with the organization and, you know, at this time, like I just found that like I didn't, you know, no longer needed the services, or it's even
Yeah.
possible that you can identify, you know, like that maybe there are other organizations that are providing different services that they might have gone to. So it's really not trying to dwell on how data is bad or not showing you're doing your job. It's really understanding,
Yeah.
how do we take this data and understand what's going on there, and
I
really
agree.
trying to focus on that. Yes. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Uh, Danielle?
Hi. Yeah, I think this is really cool, the whole conversation and that specific case and all the insights and perspectives that are being shared. Could it also be like, if that's the case, can it be like, because that mental health is not like primary prevention, it's more like secondary, like when there's a fire, right? So could it be framed as we are the organization that is providing, uh you know, we're the first resource for mental health care for free, and by the third session, like if there's an average of like how many people, you know, let's say they all stay at least 3 sessions, and after we are providing referral linkages where the individual can feel that, you know, they can thrive and they can access whatever more like streamlined referral linkages. And so like maybe measure the success of how you referred those linkages and how they stayed connected, and that they identify a support system. And maybe one measurement could be like a referral, like if there's a new client that comes and it's like, how did you know about us? Oh, because so and so told me that you guys provide this. So that could be maybe a measure of success. I don't know, that I'm just
Yeah.
like thinking, and that it could be.
Yeah, no, that's an absolute, and that you might find like, why are we seeing so many drop offs? Is it because we have referrals? So is that something now we want to start measuring? Like, is that one of our what's? Are we saying like, what are we doing? Like we're providing referrals, or, you know, trying to measure or quantify where that information, where they're coming from. Is that something that we now need to be thinking about collecting? Because it really informs the way that we're seeing these trends happen in our data. And so you can see, like, you can get to a certain point and understanding a lot about your work, and then realize that we might not have all the information we need to understand what's going on here. And that's when we get back to our framework, our logic model, or our theory of change, to understand and try to dig into what's going on. Lou.
Yes, and just hit into the comment that I was gonna give, Laura, that like sometimes when you start like your evaluation framework and your reporting framework, like through that process, you might identify that you are measuring something that you don't need to measure, or you identify that you might need to like start measuring another thing. So for example, in your case, Danielle, it's like our first like line of defense, to call it like that. It would be like the access to sports, right? To like bring kids together and support them on emotional and social emotional learning, right? But then you have seen throughout your process and your programs that like they might need an extra layer of support, and it's where you like have a different activity, which is the referral process, right? So that with that, it's like, okay, now I have a different activity. I can start thinking about how I'm gonna measure the success of that one. So be like, is it the number of referrals that I'm giving? Is it like that people are feeling better after like going through 3 sessions into like the referral that I'm going to, that I'm like how's it called, like referring to? So it's like, how can you use all of that information to, like, as Lara was saying, like, showcase that the work that you're doing, the different layers that you're doing, are supporting that bigger picture, supporting towards like the solution of that bigger problem, which is that community solution or community output.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that leads us into, well, to understanding this next element of like, so that overall like community contribution, that is your overall like why. It, like those community contributions should point back to your like mission, your vision. Like, we are an organization seeking to provide these services or this engagement or this type of work, and then really understanding how to measure that, whether it be by quantitative data or qualitative data. So the end of the day, and we can go to the next slide, unless anyone has any more questions. I don't want to actually drop off anything. Okay, we will, there's more times for questions, and obviously continue to ask them in the question, in the chat box. Oh wait, there is a question. How do we effectively leverage supplementary data from the public school system to substantiate and demonstrate the outcomes and impact of our summer youth programming in alignment with our support initiatives for the local education system? Jason, that's a heavy-handed question, but definitely there's a lot of opportunities to utilize that data. I would say let's brainstorm that, maybe book some time, and we can go a little bit more into detail how those types of like publicly available data can actually support and help you really understand how your youth program can grow and can identify the change that you're creating. So let's this basically, so getting back into how do we know our solutions have an impact in our communities. So using questions and thinking about things like publicly available data, the same way that Jason was just explaining, but also then thinking about that bigger picture question. How do we align our mission and vision with what we are trying to collect data-wise in terms of publicly available data, in terms of trends that we're seeing in our communities? One of the organizations that I work with in the Miami area is OCYC, the Overtown Youth Coalition. Oh my gosh, Overtown Coalition of Youth.
Overtown Children and Youth Coalition.
Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh, I call them OCYC all the time, and so when I had to explain it, thank you so much, Aisha. So what they do is they are a organization that is a coalition of other organizations, and so they collect data from each one of those organizations in order to inform what's going on in their community as a whole. And so they've been working with community leaders, trying to understand what are those specific data points that I should be collecting, that we should be collecting to better inform things like access to broadband and technology, access to childcare and education, and then other things like, park availability of park progress or growth and engagement in the areas that they're trying to develop, like recreational facilities. And so that really is cool to see how they're working together as a community. And that's what their organization is for. It's obviously a coalition of organizations, but you can see how they've come together to better understand as a group, like, what is our community trying to do together? How are we trying to see our community flourish and grow as we try and make impact in this area? But really trying to understand, even if you don't have a coalition of organizations, really trying to think through, like, at my highest level, what is my overall purpose as an organization? And the same thing that Aisha said, at the end of the day, you're all supposed to be working yourselves out of a job. Like, that is ideally the importance and the overall impact of most nonprofit organizations. Like, we don't want to have to provide these services, but at the end, like, we're probably always going to have to with some situations and some types of nonprofits, but really working yourself out of a job is really like the overall like dream goal of how a lot of our work can be accomplished. But moving on to our next step. So establish your measurement plan. This is where the nuts and bolts come into it. And this is the part where we're no longer IEDing, we're no longer thinking about what is the bigger picture, but how do we actually accomplish this work? So we're going into the element of creating those measurement plans. So in the UpMetrics framework, what you can do is you can see that obviously you're creating, the numbers, you're putting together your key impact indicators, and you want to make sure that you have all of these elements into one place so you can better take that flow. So this is creating your recipe. This is creating your recipe for your cake. So what is my output and outcomes are coming into it? What are the key impact indicators? So what are those, elements, the ingredients that I'm working on, my goal. So I know that what am I trying to work towards? And what is your data collection plan to do so? So getting into the UpMetrics framework again, and any other model you have, you need to be able to point to how am I collecting this data? What are the questions that I'm asking in order to get all of these different elements? So am I asking a question on a survey? Am I collecting this data from my registration information? Am I, understanding this from my grants management platform or from my donor platform? Am I trying to see information from my social media? So it's important to understand where that data is coming from. But in terms of reporting, you're creating a report for something, someone, somewhere, some stakeholder. It depends on who this information is going towards. So you need to really understand at the end of the day, next slide, what that measurement map looks like for your specific report that you're pulling in. So this is a really simple example of, how you're trying to think through a report for a funder or for a board member or some very simple plan to understand how do I actually present this information? How do I get this together? So you have what that you're doing. So obviously you might be getting funding to provide programming for youth, or you really want to understand what it is that that overall work that you're doing. Understand the key impact indicator. So it's your ingredients. So what is that metric that's going to show the work that I'm doing? Getting into your goal. So you want to showcase to anyone what type of work that you're trying to reach towards, other than, you want to actually hit a benchmark, or you're looking to improve something specifically, and then getting into the eventual data collection plans. Like I said, what types of questions, what types of information is actually informing this data. Next slide. So what are those data gathering tools? So we know that we're asking surveys, we're getting written information. So are we getting written feedback? I know that someone said they're, asking the right questions that ask them how they want to feel or engage. So trying to understand what are those questions that I'm asking. Google Forms, Sheets, SurveyMonkey, all types of different, collection tools. And then getting into the point where you're then trying to do analysis on it. So you can get into UpMetrics or Qualtrics, really just trying to go from the gamut of all the way from, the really manual to a very technical, highly skilled type of, Qualtrics is no joke. But really just knowing that there's a variety of ways to do it and really understanding what works for you, your community, and how you could be most effective in your data collection process. But we can talk a little bit next about how we're going to go through your best strategies for that data collection. So next slide. So it is important to always think through data hygiene. This part is obviously incredibly key. So really understanding the importance of clean data, because garbage data gets garbage results, and making sure that you have very, very specific, one source of truth in your data. So are you using a CRM system? Do you have a registration for responsive? You have one space that you're keeping that information, and that information is updated regularly, it's kept clean. Everyone in your team knows and understands, you know, how to input that information and make sure that it's in a good place. We'll talk a little bit about data validation, and then a little bit more into how am I doing the analysis. So hop over to the next one. I struggled with figuring out like how much in detail to go into this, but it's really important that you, as you're thinking through your data, how clean it is to do any sort of actual quantitative analysis. So we want to make sure there are very simple ways that you're cleaning up your data. And this is a really simple example of showcasing how Jordan Smith was entered many different ways. You're not going to get any good information out of this. You're not going to understand Jordan Smith with those different dates, with the way that it's named, data that is incomplete. This is just not a solid way to think through data, but making sure that your data is focused on rows and columns. If you're trying to do any sort of calculations, any sort of understanding in terms of averages, and that really is important when you're thinking through any sort of computer legible data source. And I'm happy to, you know, I love talking about data organization and data cleanliness. It's really like I could spend days just cleaning data up. It's fun for me, which I know is very rare and weird, but it's just one of those things that just gives me a lot of comfort and clarity. But this is really important to make sure that you have good clean data. And the next slide, this is data validation. So making sure that whenever you're asking questions in your surveys, are we making sure that we're giving them the opportunity to answer it in a way that is consistent across the board? So we know we have, we're asking survey respondents, what county do you live in? Don't give them the option to type in every single county that exists, because when I type in Miami-Dade, maybe Miami's capital and then lowercase, and then maybe I put a hyphen, maybe I didn't. So just making sure that you are setting yourself up for success so it's not a huge nightmare on the back end. Trying to ask as many drop-down questions as you can where you have the ability to control those results. Making sure that when you are asking questions for surveys that you are for your specific sites that you're working on, if you are doing any level of Likert scales. So Likert scale is the 1 to 5 system. How on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about this? Making sure that your Likert scale is consistent across your entire survey. So if you go from strongly agree to strongly disagree, making sure that that is clear to the participant and whoever you're asking, that is very, very obvious and very clear. And getting into that data validation element, just making sure that your information is coming in nice and clean in a way that you could do some analysis on it. And I will then go to the next slide so you can see how am I actually doing that analysis at the end of the day? Like, what does it actually look like for me to start showcasing pie charts, graphs, metrics, simple metrics of averages, sums, counts, distinct counts, all of those. I want to say, once you have clean data and you have things in rows and columns, use technology to your advantage. Or if you are using Google Sheets or Google Forms, you can quickly go to see this information via Google Studio, via any sort of like SurveyMonkey also showcases a lot of results in a really clean way once you have that information input in the right way. And using ChatGPT, I know that AI could be a scary thing, but I use it all the time in my day-to-day work. If I want to understand how can I see the growth in my social emotional learning, so I know I want to see like column B minus column D, but like I don't know exactly what formula to use. Ask ChatGPT. It really knows so much by just explaining what you want to do with it. So yes, it is amazing. There's also there's other types of like AI that you can use to help you understand like what types of formulas to use or how to showcase analysis, or say like I want to put together a report for this? How would I come up with these 5 metrics based on this data that I have here? So really just trying to use all the different elements and all the things you have available to you to create these reports, or to create any sort of metrics or elements that you're not confident of yourself. And then finally, at the end of the day, this is an analysis. So the Lego house is the same thing as the cake baking. We understand this whole process is, you need to make sure that you have all the pieces. You need to make sure that you're prepared. Do you have every single Lego that you need? Is it all clean? Is it all organized? Do you have all of your ingredients? Like, your eggs are out, your flour's out, it's all there. But then making sure that everything is like prepared, that like, how does this actually help you, like, set this up? Getting into understanding the different elements of your house, like what's going to be the part that showcases my roof, what's going to be the part that showcases the door. And then at the end of the day, like, you can have the door, you can have the roof, but like, how do you actually show the house? How do you actually put the house together? How do you make people understand how this all works together to better show that flow and to better help you set your stakeholder up for success in understanding the message you're trying to communicate? So, that really is, it's really good to take a step back from the work that you're doing and what you're seeing in order to get that overall picture set up and ready to go. So I'm going to pass it over to Lou. She's going to take us through the rest.
Thank you, Lara. And I wanted to like say it out loud that like, I know this might be a lot of information. It takes so many steps like going into like doing data analysis and data cleaning, but we wanted to give you all the best tips at the beginning when you're getting started, so that like when you're further into the future, or like further when you have like more data to analyze, like you make your life a little bit easier, right? Like, even like I was like joking with Lara like earlier today, it's like even having that space between like one answer to another can alter your like result analysis. So these are a few things that we wanted to share with you all, so that like you can keep in mind whenever you are building a survey. Let's say that you have like one survey, but like for different programs, you use the same type of answers. Like you like can copy and paste the same like questions that you're asking with the same like options for answers, so that like when you do the analysis on the back end, like it's helpful and it's easier, so you don't have to do that much cleaning. So, and also we wanted to say it out loud, is like sometimes this might be the work of like one specific person doing all of the impact evaluation measurement for an organization. So like, we know it's a lot of information, but again, we wanted to give you like the first insight into like how can you start preparing yourself for success. So you have all of this data. Now, what am I gonna be doing with all of this information? I have all of these percentages on my table, on like, spreadsheets. Like, okay, Luisanne, I have all of this like qualitative data. I don't know what to do with this. So we just wanted to give you the reminder that like you can use this data and this information, again, to understand your expected results, to know if your program is successful, or if there's anything that you would need to change or not, or like you say it out loud, like based on the example that Andrea shared about the turnouts, right? Or like the people leaving the program. You could say, Andrea, is like, we're providing this service, we had like this percentage of like people leaving the program, but it's because of X, Y, and Z. Like you can use all of this information to inform your decision and to inform the mission and the vision of your organization. Then we're going to measure your program performance, again, telling the story. And as I was mentioning before, iterate or innovate in your process. So I'm gonna go into like one of my favorite ones, which is like data visualization and the different ways of how you can measure, how you can like showcase your information and your data. There are multiple ones, like you don't have to do it all on impact reports. So I'm gonna give some examples into like how we do it and how other organizations do it. So the first one is that you can share your impact and your percentages via social media using a lot of graphics, right? So you can use, like Canva has really cool templates when it comes to data visualization, so that like you're just not dropping the percentage that says like 50% of people are like going to school more because of our program. It's like, how can you like leverage different visual graphics to showcase the impact of your organization? So a cool one that I like, it's the Pew Research Institute, which is actually a think tank that do a lot of research. So they have figured out ways of how you can visualize the information that they have gathered from their research. The second one is that you can showcase your impact on a one-pager. You don't necessarily have to do an end of year program report or an end of year like organizational report. If you are starting on your data gathering process, you can collect the information and showcase it on a one-pager impact report. And again, this is super helpful because it gives like some insight to again like either funders or other stakeholders about the work that you're doing, right? So like you can say over there on this one pager, like I don't know how many classes you did. Like you can showcase to how many counties you were present. And then with that, like after you have your information about your outputs and your outcomes, you can also say that like because of our workshop that we did, I don't know, in Little Haiti, we know that 20% of the kids feel better about like going back to school. So again, all of that will be based on your own recipe and your own cake mix, as Lara was saying. Like all of that has to be making sense for you and your organization. The other one, which is one of the most common ones that we know, it's creating an impact report. So again, you could have like that designated pages on your impact report that has percentages. But the thing that I would recommend you is to embed quotes, embed pictures, embed like the numbers throughout the whole report so that it's not overwhelming for the person that is reading the information. I mean, I thrive on reading impact reports because I love them and I do it for fun, but there might be a few people that don't. So I wanted to make sure that you use like different graphic elements and the different type of data, both qualitative and quantitative, to showcase the information and the impact that you have with your organization. The other creative ways that you can do it is to do it through videos. So this is an example of how we did it for the 10 Days of Connection 2022. Throughout the video, we talk about the program, but within the video, we talk also about like what was our reach for that year's program, right? So we share that we engaged more than 170 host organizations and that we involved more than 2,500 people throughout the 10 days program in 2022. So these are some creative ways also to like how can you portray the impact that you're having within the community. And the last one, which is something that we started this year, is like also showcasing on a website mode or website report. So you can use again the same number or the same formula into like how you're building your impact reports and showcase it in a website format. For this one, we use a platform called Vev that is actually free and it's very easy to use and you can embed within your organization's website. So over there, again, like make sure you leverage like different colors, pictures, like you can use like different videos also to showcase the work that you have been doing. So that it's also like appealing for whoever is seeing it. So with that, I know there was a lot of information. I want to pause again to open up the space and to see if you have any questions that both Larry and I can answer. So I'm gonna open the floor for you all. Which one, Fab? For the website?
Yes.
It's called Vev.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any questions, comments? Like, we know there was a lot of information, thoughts, noises. Yes, Kendra.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm here representing Swarm from Miami Blanco. And we're just wondering about some ideas for some questions that are like the most effective types of questions on a survey besides demographics that could yield important information. I know that this whole workshop was about like, you know, figuring out the recipe and the parts of your cake, but like generally speaking, what kind of questions can be yielding us that kind of important information that we need?
Okay, that is a good question. And then also jump in here, Lara, if you have any insights. But the first one is like similar to that measurement plan, Kendra, is like understanding what do you need as an organization to report out. So like one thing that you could see is like what's the trend that you are seeing that you have been asked for example, whenever you are like either applying for grants or applying to any other services, right? So general ones that I would recommend always to have, it's of course like name, email, and then in terms of demographic and data, it would be sexual orientation, like gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, and national origin. And for those ones, I always recommend to leave it as optional, right? So like if people want to answer them, like you will have, you'll be able to gather that information. And also when you're building those questions, always leave like an answer or like an option for I don't wish to respond, so that like you also like encourage people to like respond to the ones that they want. So going back to the question, sorry, it would be gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, and age. So those are like one of the most general ones when it comes to demographics.
Cool. And other than demographics, what kind of thing? I know that's kind of like a large question.
Yeah, that would depend on what you are doing, right? So like what you're doing as an organization, what's like the like related to like again the problem that you're trying to solve with the solution that you're implementing, and then the impact that you want to have. So I know it's like a very broad answer, but it's like very tailored to like what you're doing, right? Into like how you want to inform that your impact it's supporting to that bigger picture, to that problem. Joanne, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to recommend, Kendra, if no one from Miami Bloco attended the Theory of Change workshop, that was the first workshop that we delivered back in October. So all of that is in the resource library. I think that workshop is key for you to determine what questions to ask, right? Because as I hear you all and as we get all these tips from Lara and Luisana, it's like it's very time consuming, right? So my concern is that we're adding this on top of all of the other things that we do. And I want you to think that impact evaluation should be permeated into every single thing that you do, right? All the way from when you're planning a workshop, a concert, etc. As you plan your activities, what is going to happen at that activity that is going to allow you to measure things and capture things, so that at the end is easier for you, but also at the end, you end up with what you need, right? I want to make sure that we're not designing these reports and all this impact evaluation processes for funders only, right? That is one of the things that we need to do, right? So at Radical Partners, we always say, we are measuring an impact, like measuring our impact and reporting on it. Yes, because it helps for donations, but also it helps us realize ourselves if we are accomplishing what we said we would wanted to. And thirdly, it allows us to iterate quickly, right? So don't forget that these things should also serve you. All that to say, Kendra, to be very specific, please make sure that your team watches that Theory of Change workshop, and more than anything, that you define that theory of change so that you know what you want to measure. And once you know what you want to know and what you want to measure, then following Lara's advice, you can ask ChatGPT, can you please give me 10 questions that will allow me to measure how people feel, or that will allow me to know what people blah, blah, blah. But if you don't know what you need, it is very hard. And I'm sure that Google can give you a lot of things, but we want to make sure that you're not copy pasting questions that other people have used in the past if it's not going to serve you.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Joanne. And I know that we had a few questions at the beginning to like how to embed this data collection process. So like one thing that we recommend is like making it part of your like session, right? Or your workshop, or like being intentional to like when you are collecting this information, so that like you don't leave it as an afterthought, right? Or you don't leave it as like, oh, I'm gonna send the email to the participants so that they can fill out the survey. So even if you see it now in the workshops, I allow you all to like give us like 2 minutes of your time with one song to give us your feedback, right? And like based on all of that information, we have been able to iterate as we go all of like the workshops like month by month. So similar to what Joanne said, Kendra, is like also how this information is gonna help you as your organization. Ontario.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. Where do we stop with the questions? I've taken surveys that are so long that by the time you get to a certain point, you're just clicking things. And then you have to type a paragraph at the end of that. So, like, where's that safe space, especially in our case, because we work with youth and we want to know the impact not only with their parents, but with them and their attention span is not, even if it is agree or disagree, their attention span is not, it's very short. So where's that safe spot to where we get quality information without overwhelming the person taking the survey?
This is a huge problem with a lot of my clients as well, and really just trying to understand like how do I not overwhelm them? And that is in understanding, and I'm gonna go back to it, is like what are we actually trying to measure? What do we need from this? And not asking superfluous questions. I have come through and seen so many surveys that people are asking this, and I ask, why are you asking this? Like, where are you reporting on this information? What is this actually doing to support you understanding the growth of your mission? Sometimes things are just operational, but really you need to try and get your surveys as succinct as possible and continue to collect that survey data as long as you can. So I know Luisana and the Radicale Partners team, they have very specific questions that they ask every single respondee in every single one. So because it tracks to the pillars that they're trying to really focus on and showcase the impact and the work of Radicale Partners. So trying to identify and cull that down as much as possible so you're not asking questions that are going to exhaust people. And then just creating that culture of survey respondent. Like, how do we encourage them? Like, how do we make them know like what this data is going to be used for? What is it? Why is it important that we're collecting this data? So Luisana just obviously said, hey, we're going to take the survey. We're going to play music while you're doing it because we want to know how to do better by you and, learn how to be better for our work and to understand what are we doing. So I, found out from my last session that I was speaking too fast. I made a really concerted effort because I got that feedback in a survey from the last session to slow down. See, I even slowed down just while saying that. So just really trying to understand that you have to use this data that you're collecting in every single survey, or there's no point in doing it. And people need to understand why you're using it or what you're doing with it. For kids though, man, I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with kids, but really making sure that when you are utilizing this data, it's actually supporting the work that you're doing. So, just trying to incentivize that. So I think specifically with kids, just making them sit down and do it and like watching them while they're doing it. I think that's the only way. Maybe Candy, I don't know.
Yeah. For now, I can share definitely not more than 10 questions, and not more than 10 questions. Again, if you can ask one question, just ask one. But if you really need more, then you can go up to 10. And then the visuals of the questions really matter as well. So make sure that the question is not 10 different pages, but that people can actually scroll down, because when they see what they can do, they're like, okay, it's actually doable, so I'm going to go and do it. But if you hide the other questions from them, they might be like, oh, this is going to take me forever. So they might just ditch the answering the questions. And then the other thing that you could definitely take away here is when you ask a question, make sure that it's just one question, right? Not things like, we want to know how you feel and what you learned from this workshop, right? Because then you make it confusing for them. So whatever question you have should be a yes or no answer, a multiple choice answer, or a testimonial or a narrative, but that makes me focus on one thing. Those are like 3 best practices that you can take away today before you get to do all of the theory of change work that Luisana, Lara, and I are encouraging you to do.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I see here Itza also has some suggestions that like you can also leverage your team or your volunteer to take the survey first and let you know it's like, okay, this is too long or like this is too much. So with that, again, you can also iterate. There is another platform that we started using for this year's 10 Days of Connection. They use it emojis too. So in case that you also want to use like emojis or like other things that is not like, I don't want to call it boring because I love surveys, but like people found boring like doing surveys. Like you can use like the different emoji scales so that people can respond. And like for this one, I can tell you, and I'll drop in the chat the platform. Like people were finishing the survey in like 30 seconds to 1 minute. Like it even gives you like the time to like how much time people were investing, replying to the survey or the information that we asked. So you can also leverage these other tools as well. Okay. Any last questions?
I'll just add something as a person who is new to like being on, involved in creating a nonprofit organization and someone who has worked for and been, a part of nonprofit organizations before. Always the surveys at the end have been, drudgery. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to keep it simple and make sure, because I'm a very smart person, and still I get frustrated by that, and if it's really long or too many questions, sometimes I just feel like people aren't going to fill it out. So that's just my personal viewpoint that keeps coming up for me with these questions.
Thank you so much, Kendra, for sharing. Already, team, so we're getting closer to 10:30. And with that, I wanted to say, did it change? It's a wrap, and I hear the confetti, because we did it. It's been 10 months that we have been together on these virtual sessions. So I want to give you all also, like, please like applaud yourself, because you have been here with us for a while. I also want to thank Lara for being here with us and for sharing her awesomeness and all of her knowledge with us today. And again, with Lara, like we learned so much, and like again, we can get to like nerd out a lot about data. So if you have any questions, please make sure like you book time with her. She's available as one of the coaches for this program. And going into